Today I'm going to share with you guys my new acrylic painting shortcuts that have evolved my painting process over the last couple of years. Hi, I'm Anastasia Mack and it's super fantastic to see you again, video audience. I have had a few very adventurous, very busy art festival seasons. Have also moved into a new home, have a new studio, but it's so nice to be back in this virtual space again, sharing with you stories on how I create my paintings. Most of us who create art do so because it's a joyous process, right? Many artists' favorite part of painting is when you reach what is called the state of flow. It's when the painting unfolds in front of you almost effortlessly and you guide it just a little bit, but you reach that higher level of energy. It is almost similar to something like a runner's high. And that tends to be the ultimate reward of art creation. That's why we come back to it over and over again. And so you reach the state of flow when your painting process itself becomes more frictionless, when you reduce the little distractions and little tasks that take up just a little bit too much time between getting the paint on your brush and putting the paint on your canvas. By reducing friction and making the painting process itself more elegant, you reach the state of flow faster. So today's painting shortcuts are all about reducing friction. You're not going to see anything groundbreaking here today, so don't be surprised if my recommendations are very basic, but they add up to something. And I only have 3 painting tips for you, but they have totally sped up how I paint within the last year. First one is if you use low viscosity to medium viscosity paint that comes in plastic jars and only plastic jars, like this or this. I use Nova brand paint, so this is the case for Nova, for example. Put your paint into squeezable plastic bottles already. And viscosity, by the way, means paint thickness. So low viscosity would be paint that is more flowy, and medium viscosity would be paint that is not too thick, not too thin. I would classify Nova as a medium viscosity. Now you may be thinking, thanks, Captain Obvious. Plastic bottles, oh my God, newsflash. So yeah, plastic bottles, because many artists I find know about this, but most of us don't take time to do this. I have been making my living from art full-time for the last 16 years. And why in the world did it take me up until last year to sit down and take the time to put all of my colors into these squeezable plastic bottles? Why? Because it's a task. It took me a couple of days to do it. It took me some time to go through all the paint and actually order these bottles and then put the paint into plastic bottles, make sure I haven't spilled anything, clean up my mess, and have these beautiful squeezable cases of paint available for my use. I'm telling you guys, this has made such a huge difference in how I control paint on my palette. I used to open the jar. The jar would always get stuck, by the way. I used to open the jar, scoop out the paint with a painting knife, put it on my palette in larger amounts. The knife would get dirty. I would have to clean off my knife on the paper towel, close the jar back up, put it back. Not only that, but because of all the air you're constantly allowing into the paint jar, contributes to paint drying out much faster. Sometimes, if you work in semi-humid environment, it also can contribute to a lot of mold growing in your paint. So for all these different reasons, squeezable plastic bottle, especially if you're painting more detailed artwork like I do, expressive art, squeeze bottle resolves multiple problems for you. Not only reduces the time of each step of getting the certain color out of the container, but also it prevents all these other problems from happening. There's also a specific method I use of how I actually go about stuffing all the paint into these squeeze bottles. So let me show you that real quick. Supplies that you're going to need are plastic bottles, obviously, I bought these online. A piece of paper that I put down so that I don't make a mess. Paper towels. Obviously the paint that comes in a jar. And the palette knife, or some kind of a tool to scoop the paint out. A spoon will also work for this, or a regular plastic knife. Scissors. And a couple of sheets of thicker paper. I use cardstock paper for this. Also some water nearby, in case you make a mess and have to clean it up. And tape. And you will see why, but I use packaging tape for this project. My very first step is to take the bottle and take the lid and make the opening of the tip a little bit larger. So I cut it to this line right about here. Okay, that's done. So now we have the bottle, we have the container with paint. But the problem is, when you try to pour the paint into the bottle, especially when it comes out of a much larger container, and especially when the paint tends to be just a little bit more viscous, a little bit more thick, it spills all around the bottle. It is really, really hard to get it into this little opening. And here's where the cardstock and scissors and tape comes in. I'm going to make a paint funnel, a disposable one. Let me move this away for the time being. For this fancy paint funnel, I cut out a square from cardstock, about 4 inches by 4 inches-ish. By the way, don't use regular copy paper for it. Use thicker paper because copy paper is just gonna fall apart. And then I fold it like so, where a little bit of an overlap remains. And then I fold it over and tape it up. You can do the worst taping job ever. It doesn't really matter. This funnel is a one-time use. And then I cut the opening to be maybe about 1/2 inch in size. I cut off the excess to make it even. And now we have this one-time use paper funnel. Some of you may ask, why not just buy a plastic funnel and use that instead of going through all this hassle? Oh, you'll see. Back to the paint bottle now. The funnel goes right inside of it. And here's the fun part. Are you ready? Woo! All the paint easily goes into the bottle. It is a little bit tougher to put thicker paint in there, and depending on the paint pigment, even the paints are made by the same brand. Some of the paint can be a lot more viscous. So your pouring process has to be slower, and that's where the funnel really matters, is because the paint bulks up at the top of it and you can control it much better. So right now I'm going to scoop the rest of it out with the knife. All of it goes inside. I'm trying to get as much paint out as possible so this container remains 100% empty of the paint chunks. Well, this is as well as I can do with this one. This squeeze bottle is ready to go, and I have just tested it, and it's disposing paint quite well. When I purchase more of the same color, it's just going to go into this bottle to fill it up. And when you are done using it, make sure to always cover it with this little plastic lid so that the air doesn't get into the squeeze bottle. And that way it stays wet for a long, long time without drying out on you. And so the reason I like to use a paper funnel instead of a plastic funnel, which would be something like this, is because I would have to rinse out fully my plastic funnel for every color. And it is a lot of rinsing. There's a lot of paint going down your drain, going down your sink, instead of just simply plucking the paper funnel out of my squeeze bottle and throwing it out. This is a lot more hassle. And also, if you don't rinse it out thoroughly, you risk contaminating the next color with your previous paint color. So plastic funnel is a little bit more of a messy option here. Some of you may ask, does the inside of the squeeze bottle ever have to be cleaned? In my experience, very, very rarely. Only if you have some paint that has dried out due to very infrequent use, you may end up with dry chunks of it in the bottom of the squeeze bottle. And in that case, you can just fill it up with water, let that sit for a while, and use a tool to scoop out the hard parts of paint. I use a skewer stick like this to clean out my nozzle and to clean out other parts of the container if I ever have to, but I rarely do. But a skewer stick works quite well for cleaning out a clogged nozzle like that. And that's all there is to it. The process can be a little bit cumbersome and a little bit messy when you have to get all the colors into the squeeze bottles, but you do it once and then you are done. And then to refill the colors, it's not as much work because you don't refill all of your colors at the same time. So the hardest part of it is getting all the colors into the bottles. And then you're all set, you're good to go, and your painting process is going to be much faster. My favorite acrylic painting shortcut number 2 is a plastic peel-off palette. So one of these guys. If you have watched my painting tutorial videos before, or if you are currently enrolled in one of my painting courses, you may know that I have been very loyal to my glass painting palette. It sits on top of my shelf where I store all my paint and some of the supplies, and I just pour the paint right up there and mix it up and scrape it off when I'm done. However, I have realized recently that it takes me a step to walk to my glass palette, mix up the paint, then go back to my canvas and put the paint on my canvas. And then I take another step to get more paint, go back to my canvas. My shelf doesn't sit right next to me. It's not within reaching distance because the canvas takes up a little bit of room. So all those steps actually add up to many seconds and many minutes. And in the end, it takes my whole painting process longer. And all these steps do create friction between every satisfying moment of actually putting my brush strokes on canvas. So my solution has become to keep my paint right next to my painting surface. What I do is I put this plastic palette on my easel right underneath my canvas, and I pour the paint right on, mix it up right in front of me, and now the distance between my palette and my painting is about a foot versus like 4 feet. And it has saved me a lot of time. Also, the plastic palettes are pretty light as opposed to holding glass or holding paper palette pad. This does not wear out your hand. So I'm right-handed. I hold my palette in my left hand. If I ever have to get really close to my painting, I hold it right in my hand. As far as the surface of the palette goes, any flat, slick plastic palette would be probably considered a peel-off palette because the paint is really easy to remove. You can just pick it up once it's all fully dry and lift it up and take it off. I have purchased 3 of these guys. And what happens when I paint is when I fill up my palette, I just put it away, I let it dry, and I move on to the next one. Meanwhile, the first one dries, I fill up my second one, I go back to my first one, I remove the paint off of it after it has been dried, and I just switch between the 3. It makes my process a lot easier and a lot faster. And the price of these palettes, I don't remember for certain, I have to check, but I think they're about $12, maybe $15 a piece. So this is very inexpensive investment. They have lasted for quite some time now, totally worth the money. And removing paint from these, like I said, is easiest when the paint has fully dried, but I also have a very specific method of how I remove the paint from these palettes. So let me show you that. Here's my favorite method of cleaning off my peel-off plastic palette. As the name suggests, some of the paint just comes off by being peeled away. But this practice tends to get old pretty fast. So I started researching other methods of cleaning it. Scraping paint with the scraper does work, but you risk damaging the palette. Plastic is a softer material, and scraping it over and over and over again constantly leaves marks and scratches on the palette. And in the end, if you have a lot of marks on it, it's not going to be as slick as it was when you purchased it. You can rinse your plastic palette at the sink when your paint is dry or semi-dry, but then you're going to be putting acrylic paint into your sewer system, which is also not advised. The method that has become most effective for me is using packaging tape. I take a little piece of tape and use that to peel the paint away from my palette over and over, over and over, until most of the paint is gone. One more piece. I don't mind the couple of minutes that it takes me to do this because this process is weirdly satisfying. Now the palette is ready to go again. The tiny amounts of paint that is left behind does not affect my paint mixes, so it doesn't bother me at all. And this is the amount of tape that I have used up. Some may say I'm wasting plastic tape, but this has been the most efficient method for me. It prevents from clogging up my sewers, and paint itself dries into a plastic film. So using just a little bit more plastic film to make the cleaning process clean and neat is totally worth it for me. And let's face it, we have a lot more plastic coming in on all of our packages and boxes from online orders that we tend to get from all the online shopping. My favorite acrylic painting shortcut number 3 is a mist bottle. Not a spray bottle, a mist bottle. As we all know, acrylic paint dries pretty fast. When you mix up your paint colors, you want them to last for a little while so that you can get that paint on your canvas. And up until recently, I have been using a spray bottle, similar to this, to spray my palette. What I've noticed is that spray bottle drops these larger water droplets onto the paint, and the mixture of water and paint becomes a little bit unevenly distributed on my palette. And what happens is parts of the paint still dry up, parts of the paint are way too saturated, and the easiest thing ever, which I haven't thought about before, was to switch up to a mist bottle. These are usually not an art store item. They're sold for hair care, beauty, but they're pretty easy to find online. When you work in drier climates or during certain seasons, like we have winter in Chicago right now, and forced air heat that I have is making my paint dry even faster, it's really crucial to have something like this right near you when you're painting with acrylics. My humidifier doesn't seem to give me enough humidity to keep my paints wet for longer, but when I do use this bottle, when I spray my painting palettes, like this, once every 5 minutes maybe, it really makes a huge difference. One other tip I have is put this bottle right near you when you start your painting session, because sometimes I have this far away somewhere else in my studio and I start to paint and I get all into my painting process and I don't feel like walking away to retrieve it. In the end, my acrylic paint starts to dry faster and then I regret not having it near. Sounds silly, but it happens. So I recommend keeping it nearby, and you can also mist your hair if you want, just for fun. Well, this was the list of my recent favorite acrylic painting shortcuts. What did you think? Did you find them helpful, or were they too basic for you? Let me know in comments. Hopefully you learned something from them, even if they were super simple. Also, if there are any acrylic painting topics that you would like to have more clarity on, please share and maybe I'll make a video about it. If you want to see more painting broadcasts from my studio, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And also check the links down below because I have a freebie to give to you. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a lovely, colorful day.